Picture a glittering dinner party by the sea, where champagne flows and laughter masks a deadly secret. A harmless vicar collapses, poisoned, his death dismissed as chance. Months later, a second dinner, a second victim, a doctor who knew too much, falls to the same silent killer. Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, unraveling a chilling plot of jealousy and control. Behind the charm of a celebrated actor lies a sinister stage, where every toast is a trap and every guest a suspect. Can Poirot unmask the murderer before the final curtain falls? Welcome to three-act tragedy, a tale of deception, ambition, and deadly performance. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Crow's Nest. The September evening hung soft and heavy over the cliffs of Lumouth, where the sea whispered secrets against the jagged rocks below. Crow's Nest, Sir Charles Cartwright's imposing seaside manor, glowed like a stage set under the fading light, its whitewashed walls and tall windows catching the last rays of the sun. Inside, the dining room was a tableau of elegance. A long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's soft glow, its crystal prisms scattering light across polished silver and delicate china. 13 guests, an unlucky number, were assembling for dinner, their voices a low hum of anticipation, punctuated by the occasional clink of glass dots. Sir Charles, the celebrated actor, stood at the head of the table, his presence as commanding as it had been on the London stage. His silver hair was impeccably swept back, his eyes alight with the charm that had made him a household name. He wore a tailored dinner jacket, its lapels catching the candlelight, and his smile was that of a man who knew he held the room's attention. "My friends," he began, raising a flute of champagne, his voice resonant with theatrical warmth. "Tonight we celebrate life, love, and the mysteries that bind us." The guests murmured their approval, glasses raised in a glittering arc. Among them sat Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective, his neat moustache and polished patent leather shoes a stark contrast to the flamboyance of his host. Poirot had been invited not as a friend but as a curiosity, his reputation for unraveling the impossible having reached Sir Charles's ears. He sat quietly, his grey-green eyes darting from face to face, cataloguing each guest with the precision of a watchmaker. To his left was Lady Mary Lytton Gore, a widow of 40 with sharp blue eyes and a wit to match, her auburn hair pinned elegantly beneath a sapphire comb. Across from her was Oliver Manders, a young playwright with a brooding air, his dark curls falling over a forehead creased with artistic discontent. The table held an eclectic cast: Miss Muriel Wills, a mousy playwright with spectacles and a nervous laugh; Angela Sutcliffe, a radiant young actress whose golden curls and wide eyes drew every glance; Dr. Bartholomew Strange, a quiet physician with a scholarly demeanour and a habit of stroking his chin; and Reverend Stephen Babington, a frail vicar, with a gentle smile, accompanied by his wife, whose anxious glances betrayed her discomfort in such grand company. The remaining guests a retired colonel, a society matron, a barrister, and a few local worthies added to the evening's diverse tapestry. The meal progressed with the elegance of a well-rehearsed play. Footmen glided silently, serving lobster, bisque and roasted pheasant, while Sir Charles regaled the table with tales of his theatrical triumphs. Poirot listened, his fork poised, noting the undercurrents beneath the laughter. Lady Mary's dry quips sparred with Oliver's sardonic retorts, while Angela's nervous giggles hinted at some unspoken tension. Reverend Babington, sipping sparingly at his champagne, seemed out of place, his hands trembling slightly as he set his glass down, as dessert creme brulee with a caramelized crust was served. Sir Charles proposed another toast. To the unexpected, he declared, his eyes gleaming with an intensity Poirot found curious. The guests raised their glasses again, but before the clinking had subsided, a sharp cough broke the air. Reverend Babington, his face flushed, clutched at his throat, his eyes wide with panic. His wife cried out as he slumped forward, his glass tumbling to the floor with a crystalline crash. Dr. Strange was at his side in an instant, loosening the vicar's collar and feeling for a pulse. The room fell silent, save for Mrs. Babington's stifled sobs. "He's gone," Dr. Strange announced, his voice steady but grave. "I'm afraid it's his heart." A murmur of shock rippled through the guests. Sir Charles, his face a mask of concern, called for calm and summoned the local doctor. Poirot, however, remained seated, his fingers steepled, his eyes fixed on the fallen glass. It lay unbroken, a faint trace of champagne pooling on the floor. He noted the vicar's untouched dessert, the absence of any spilled food, and the peculiar timing of the collapse. His gaze shifted to Sir Charles, who was consoling Mrs. Babington with practiced sympathy. For a fleeting moment, Poirot caught a glint in the actor's eyes, not of grief, but of something akin to satisfaction, quickly veiled as the guests dispersed into the drawing-room. Whispering of tragedy and bad luck, Poirot lingered by the table. He bent to examine the glass, his movements precise, his mind already turning over the pieces of this unexpected drama. The evening, he sensed, had been no mere accident. It was the opening act of a far darker performance, and Hercule Poirot intended to uncover its script. Chapter 2. The inquests puzzled the village hall of Lumouth. A squat, grey-stone building nestled between the post office and a grocer's shop was oppressively warm on the morning of the inquest. The air hung thick with the scent of polished wood and stale tea, and the narrow windows did little to relieve the stuffiness. A crowd of locals, their faces a mixture of curiosity and solemnity, filled the benches, their whispers buzzing like flies against the low hum of the coroner's voice. Hercule Poirot sat at the back, his small frame almost lost in the shadow of a pillar, his black suit immaculate, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dust of the village street. His grey-green eyes, sharp as a hawk's, moved methodically over the room, noting the postures, the glances, the nervous tics of those gathered to bear witness to the inquiry into Reverend Stephen Babington's sudden death. The coroner, a portly man named Mr. Pritchard, with a walrus moustache and a voice that carried the weight of routine, presided over the proceedings with a blend of authority and impatience. He adjusted his spectacles and called the first witness, Dr. Bartholomew Strange, whose measured steps to the stand drew every eye. Dr. Strange, his scholarly air accentuated by a neatly trimmed beard and wire-rimmed glasses, recounted the events of the dinner at Crow's Nest with clinical precision. He described the vicar's collapse, the immediate examination, and his conclusion that death was due to heart failure, likely exacerbated by the excitement of the evening. The man was frail, Dr. Strange said, his voice calm but firm. Found no signs of poisoning or external injury. His heart simply gave out. Poirot's moustache twitched slightly, a subtle sign of his dissatisfaction. He noted the doctor's steady hands, the absence of hesitation in his testimony, and the way his eyes flicked briefly towards Sir Charles Cartwright, who sat near the front, his silver hair catching the light from a high window. Sir Charles, dressed in a sombre grey suit, maintained an expression of dignified sorrow, but Poirot detected a studied quality to it, as if the actor were playing a role he had rehearsed many times. Next came Mrs. Babington, her face pale and drawn beneath a black veil. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her husband's gentle nature, his aversion to alcohol, and his good health prior to the dinner. "Stephen never cared for champagne," she said, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. "He only sipped it to be polite." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Poirot leaned forward, his interest piqued. Why, he wondered, would a man who disliked alcohol drink enough to trigger a fatal reaction? The question lingered as Mrs. Babington stepped down. Her shoulders hunched with grief. The footman who had served the champagne was called next. A nervous young man named Thomas, whose Adam's apple bobbed as he answered. He confirmed that. The glasses were filled from a single bottle, poured in the pantry and carried to the table on a silver tray. "I didn't see nothing odd, sir," he stammered, glancing at Sir Charles, who nodded encouragingly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The footman's deference to his employer was natural, but there was a hesitation in his manner, a fleeting glance toward the floor that suggested more than he had said. Lady Mary Lytton Gore, her auburn hair pinned tightly, and her blue eyes alert, took the stand with a composure that contrasted with the footman's unease. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying a trace of irony as she described the dinner's elegance and the shock of the vicar's collapse. "It was all so sudden," she said. "One moment we were toasting, the next he was gone." When asked if she had noticed anything unusual, she paused, her gaze flickering toward Poirot, who inclined his head almost imperceptibly. "I did wonder why Stephen drank the champagne," she said. "He once told me he found it bitter." The coroner pressed her, but she had no more to add, and she returned to her seat with a glance at Poirot that promised further conversation. Oliver Matz, the young playwright, was less composed. His dark curls were dishevelled, and his fingers drummed restlessly on the arm of the witness chair. He admitted to feeling unwell after sipping his own champagne, describing a sharp, unpleasant taste that had made him set the glass aside. "I thought it was just bad wine," he said, his voice tinged with defiance. "But I was fine afterward." The coroner raised an eyebrow, and a few locals whispered, but no further questions were asked. Poirot made a mental note of discomfort, wondering if the playwright's sensitivity to the champagne was a clue or a coincidence. Sir Charles himself was the final witness. He rose with the grace of a man accustomed to an audience, his voice resonant and measured. He expressed deep regret for the tragedy, describing Reverend Babington as a cherished guest and a man of impeccable character. "I blame myself for not noticing his discomfort sooner," he said, his eyes glistening with what might have been tears, "but it was so sudden, so inexplicable." He confirmed the footman's account of the champagne service and dismissed any suggestion of foul play. "It was a heart attack, surely," he said, spreading his hands in a gesture of helplessness. The coroner nodded, satisfied, but Poirot's lips pursed. The actor's performance was flawless, yet there was something in his tone and note of overemphasis that grated on the detective's ear. The inquest concluded with a verdict of death by natural causes, citing Reverend Babington's known heart condition. The crowd dispersed, their murmurs fading into the clatter of footsteps on the stone floor. Poirot remained seated, his fingers steepled, his mind turning over the testimony like a jeweller examining a flawed gem. The verdict was tidy, but it did not satisfy him. Too many details: the vicar's dislike of champagne, the bitter taste noted by doctors, the absence of poison in the glass pointed to something more deliberate than a heart attack. As the hall emptied, Lady Mary approached. her expression one of cautious curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "you don't believe it was natural, do you?" Poirot regarded her with a faint smile, appreciating her perceptiveness. "Madame, the heart may fail, but the mind of Hercule Poirot does not. Rest until all is clear. There is a puzzle here, and I shall solve it." She nodded, her eyes bright with intrigue, and promised to assist if needed. Poirot left the hall and walked toward the village inn, where he had taken a room. The sea air was crisp, carrying the tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. He resolved to interview the guests privately, beginning with those who had spoken most freely. Lady Mary's observation about the vicar's habits was a thread to follow, as was Mandas's mention of the bitter taste. But it was Sir Charles who occupied Poirot's thoughts most. The actor's charm, his ease in commanding a room, suggested a man capable of orchestrating more than a dinner party. Had he orchestrated a death? At the inn, Poirot requested a pot of tisane and settled into a corner of the lounge, his notebook open before him. He sketched a diagram of the dining table, placing each guest with care. Sir Charles at the head, Reverend Babington to his right, Lady Mary across, Mandas beside her, and so on. He marked the footman's path with the tray, the moment of the toast, the collapse. The champagne was the key, he decided, but how had it been tampered with, if at all? The glass had been examined and found clean, yet the symptoms, sudden choking. Collapse suggested poison. Nicotine, perhaps, or something equally swift and traceless. He sent a note to Dr. Strange, requesting a meeting to discuss the medical details. The doctor's testimony had been confident, but Poirot sensed a reticence, a reluctance to entertain alternatives. Was it professional pride or something more? He also wrote to Oliver Mandas, inviting him for tea. The playwright's unease intrigued him. A man who noticed a bitter taste might have seen more than he realized. As evening fell, Poirot strolled along the cliff path, the sea stretching vast and grey below. He paused, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind sifting through the fragments of the case. The vicar was an unlikely victim. No wealth, no enemies, no secrets that anyone had uncovered. Why him? Was he merely a convenient target, or was his death a miscalculation? And why had Sir Charles, with his flair for drama, invited a detective to witness the event? It was as if the actor had cast Poirot in a role, unaware that the little Belgian would rewrite the script. Returning to the inn, Poirot found a reply from Dr. Strange, agreeing to meet the next morning. Mandas, however, had sent a curt note, declining, citing a rehearsal in London. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. The playwright's avoidance was telling. He would pursue that thread later. For now, he retired to his room, where he lit a single candle and sat at the small desk, his notebook open once more. He wrote a single word, motive, and underlined it twice. The death of Reverend Babington was no accident, he was certain, but the why and the how remained shrouded in shadow. As the candle flickered, Poirot's thoughts turned to the other guests. Angela Sutcliffe, the young actress, had been silent during the inquest, her beauty overshadowed by a nervous air. Miss Muriel Wills, the playwright, had watched the proceedings with a detached curiosity, her spectacles glinting as she scribbled notes. The colonel, the barrister, the society matron each had been present, yet none had offered a clue, or had they? Poirot resolved to speak with each, to probe their memories, to uncover the detail that would make the picture clear. He closed his notebook and extinguished the candle, the room plunging into darkness. The puzzle of Crow's Nest was only beginning, and Hercule Poirot with his little grey cells, was determined to see it through to its final act. The sea whispered outside, and in its rhythm he heard the challenge of a mind as cunning as his own. Chapter 3. The second act begins. The Yorkshire moors stretched bleak and windswept under a December sky, their muted greens and browns a stark contrast to the glittering warmth of Crow's Nest 3 months prior. Melford Abbey, the imposing stone residence of Dr. Bartholomew Strange, stood like a sentinel against the rolling hills, its Gothic arches and ivy-clad walls exuding an air of solemn grandeur. Hercule Poirot, bundled in a heavy overcoat, his scarf meticulously knotted, stepped from the hired car with Captain Arthur Hastings at his side. The chill air nipped at Poirot's moustache, but his eyes gleamed with anticipation. He had been invited to another dinner party, and the coincidence of its guest list mirroring that fateful evening in Loomuth was not lost on him. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat and surveyed the Abbey with a soldier's eye. "Looks a bit grim, doesn't it, Poirot?" he remarked, his breath clouding in the frosty air. "Hard to believe we're here for a party after what happened last time." "Mon cher Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice crisp, "it is precisely because of what happened last time that we are here. The stage is set for a second act, and Hercule Poirot does not believe in coincidences." He tapped his cane lightly on the gravel drive, his mind already mapping the evening ahead. The great hall of Melford Abbey was a study in contrasts to Sir Charles's seaside elegance. Oak-panelled walls, hung with ancestral portraits, absorbed the light of a massive chandelier, casting long shadows across the flagstone floor. A fire roared in the hearth, its crackle mingling with the low murmur of arriving guests. Sir Charles Cartwright was there, his silver hair as immaculate as ever, his smile warm but tinged with a subtle strain. He greeted Poirot with theatrical enthusiasm, clasping his hand. "Monsieur Poirot, a pleasure to see you again. I trust you'll find this evening less eventful than our last." Poirot inclined his head, his smile polite but guarded. "One hopes, Sir Charles, that the only drama tonight will be in the conversation." His eyes lingered on the actor, noting the faintest tremor in his hand, a detail others might overlook. The guest list was strikingly familiar, save for the absence of the late Reverend Babington and his wife, Lady Mary Lytton Gore, her auburn hair catching the firelight, offered Poirot a knowing glance, as if acknowledging their shared skepticism from the inquest. Oliver Manders, the playwright, stood by the window, his dark eyes restless, a cigarette dangling from his fingers. Angela Sutcliffe, radiant in an emerald green gown, laughed softly at something Dr. Strange said, though her eyes darted nervously towards Sir Charles. Miss Muriel Wills, her spectacles glinting, scribbled in a small notebook, while the Colonel, the barrister, and the society matron filled out the party, their presence lending an air of continuity to the gathering. Dr. Strange, as host, moved among his guests with quiet assurance, his scholarly demeanour softened by the role of hospitable gentleman. He welcomed Poirot and Hastings with a firm handshake, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "I'm glad you could join us, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "I trust you'll find Melford less dramatic than Loomuth." Poirot's lips curved. "Drama, Doctor, has a way of finding its stage, no matter the setting." Hastings suppressed a chuckle, accustomed to his friend's cryptic pronouncements. Dinner was served in the Abbey's dining room, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and a long table set with crystal and silver. The menu was rich: roast lamb with rosemary and a delicate pear tart, But Poirot's attention was less on the food than on the guests. He sat between Lady Mary and the barrister, Mr. Satterthwaite, whose penchant for gossip proved useful. Satterthwaite whispered that Dr. Strange had been preoccupied of late, often locked in his study with medical journals and correspondence. "He's been digging into something," Satterthwaite confided, though he won't say what. Across the table, Sir Charles entertained with stories of the stage, his voice weaving a spell over the company. Yet Poirot noticed Angela's unease, her laughter forced when Sir Charles's gaze lingered on her. Oliver Manders, seated beside her, seemed distracted, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the tablecloth. Poirot's eyes flicked to Dr. Strange, who sipped his wine with a thoughtful air, as if weighing each word spoken around him. As the meal drew to a close, Dr. Strange proposed a toast with a glass of vintage port, its ruby hue catching the candlelight. "To friendship," he said, his voice steady, "and to clarity in all things." The guests raised their glasses, and Poirot, ever cautious, touched his lips to the port without drinking. He watched as Dr. Strange took a generous sip, his expression serene. Moments later, the serenity shattered. Dr. Strange's glass slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table. He gasped, his face contorting, and clutched at his chest. The room froze as he staggered to his feet, his breath coming in ragged bursts, before collapsing onto the floor. Angela screamed, and Sir Charles was at the doctor's side in an instant, loosening his collar. Lady Mary, her face pale but composed, called for a doctor. Though the irony hung heavy in the air, Poirot, moving with surprising agility, knelt beside the fallen man, his fingers probing for a pulse. The pulse was faint, erratic, then gone. He looked up, his eyes meeting Sir Charles's. "He is dead," Poirot said quietly, and the words seemed to echo in the silent room. Chaos erupted. The society matron fainted, and the colonel barked orders to the staff. Hastings, practical as ever, helped clear the room while Poirot examined the scene. The spilled port stained the tablecloth, its sharp, chemical scent distinct from the rich aroma of the wine. Poirot signalled to a footman to preserve the glass and bottle, his mind racing. This was no heart attack, he was certain. The symptoms, convulsions, pointed to poison, and the coincidence of another death at a dinner party was too stark to ignore. As the local police were summoned, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami," he said, his voice low, "we have witnessed the second act of a tragedy, and I fear the curtain has not yet fallen. Observe the guests, Hastings. Their faces will tell us much." Hastings nodded, his eyes scanning the room. Sir Charles, his composure shaken, was consoling Angela, whose tears seemed genuine but tinged with fear. Oliver Manders stood apart, his cigarette forgotten, his expression unreadable. Lady Mary approached Poirot, her voice steady despite the pallor of her cheeks. "Monsieur Poirot, this cannot be chance. 2 deaths, 2 dinners, it's monstrous." "Indeed," Madame Poirot replied, his gaze fixed on the dining table. "But the question is not only who, but why, and why now?" He noted the absence of the footman who had served the port, and made a mental note to question him later. The police arrived, led by Inspector Crossfield, a gruff man with a nonsense air. He took statements, but his questions were blunt, focused on the obvious. Poirot, however, lingered by the table, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the fallen glass. No vial or syringe was found, but the port's acrid undertone suggested a toxin nicotine. Perhaps, as in his suspicions about the first death. He requested the bottle and glass be sent for analysis, though he doubted the poisoner. would have left such obvious traces, as the guests were ushered to the drawing-room to await further questioning. Poirot spoke briefly with Inspector Crossfield, urging discretion. "This is no simple crime, Inspector," he said. "It is a performance, and we must understand the script before we unmask the player." Crossfield grunted, skeptical but willing to let the famous detective assist. Poirot returned to Hastings, who was watching Sir Charles with a frown. "I don't like the look of him, Poirot," Hastings said. "He's too calm, too perfect, like he's acting." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Oui, mon ami. Sir Charles is a man of the stage, and the stage is his weapon. But we must also consider the others. Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, for instance, her fear is real, but of what? And Monsieur Manders, why does he avoid my gaze?" The evening drew to a close with the guests confined to the Abbey, the police guarding the exits. Poirot, his mind a whirl of possibilities, retired to his guest room, a small chamber with a view of the moonlit moors. He sat at a writing desk, his notebook open, and began to sketch a new diagram: the dining table at Melford, the placement of the guests, the moment of the toast. He wrote nicotine beside Dr. Strange's name, and underlined Sir Charles with a flourish. The second death was no accident. He was certain, but its purpose eluded him. Was Dr. Strange the intended target, or was he, like the vicar, a pawn in a larger game? And why had Sir Charles, the common thread between both tragedies, invited Poirot to both? The little Belgian closed his notebook, his lips curving in a determined smile. The stage was set, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the final curtain revealed the truth. Chapter 4. The threads converged. The train from Yorkshire to London rattled through the countryside, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the whirl of thoughts in Hercule Poirot's mind. Seated in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands folded neatly over his cane, Poirot stared out at the passing fields, their patchwork greens blurred by a persistent drizzle. Captain Hastings, opposite him, fidgeted with a newspaper, his brow furrowed. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, "2 deaths at 2 dinners, and both times were there. It's dashed peculiar, don't you think? Peculiar, mon ami." Poirot's voice was soft, but his grey-green eyes gleamed with intensity. "It is not peculiarity, but design. The hand that weaves this tragedy is deliberate, and Hercule Poirot will unravel its threads." He tapped his temple, indicating the little grey cells already at work. Back in London, Poirot established himself in his impeccably ordered flat, where the symmetry of the furniture and the gleam of polished surfaces soothed his need for precision. Hastings, less concerned with aesthetics, sprawled in an armchair, sipping tea and awaiting instructions. Poirot began his investigation with methodical care, determined to connect the deaths of Reverend Babington and Dr. Bartholomew Strange. The similarities: sudden collapse, a shared guest list, the presence of Sir Charles Cartwright were too stark to dismiss. Yet the motive remained elusive. Poirot's first task was to pursue the clue hinted at by Mr. Satterthwaite at Melford Abbey, Dr. Strange's preoccupation with some private inquiry. He dispatched a letter to the doctor's housekeeper, Mrs. Wellman, requesting access to his study. The reply came swiftly, inviting Poirot to the Yorkshire estate the following day. He also telephoned the Home Office chemist who had analysed the port from Melford, learning that traces of nicotina, rare and potent poison, had indeed been found in Dr. Strange's glass. The bottle itself was clean, suggesting the toxin had been added to the glass alone. Poirot's lips pursed. The precision of the act pointed to a mind both bold and meticulous. The journey back to Yorkshire was uneventful, save for grumbling about the early hour. Melford Abbey, shrouded in mist, seemed even more sombre than before. Mrs. Wellman, a stout woman with a nonsense air, led Poirot and Hastings to Dr. Strange's study, a book-lined room dominated by a heavy oak desk. "He spent hours here lately," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Always reading, writing letters, muttering about some discovery." Poirot's eyes scanned the room, noting the medical journals stacked neatly, their pages marked with slips of paper. On the desk lay a locked diary, which Mrs. Wellman opened with a key from the doctor's effects. Inside, Poirot found meticulous notes, mostly on obscure toxins. But one entry caught his attention. Suspicions confirmed Crow's Nest. A certain guest merits closer scrutiny. Must proceed with caution. The date was 2 days before the fatal dinner at Melford. Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like he was onto something," Hastings said. "Or someone." "Precisement," Poirot murmured, pocketing a copy of the entry. He searched the desk further, finding a letter addressed to Dr. Strange from a colleague in London, mentioning a rare case of nicotine poisoning. The letter speculated on its use as a murder weapon, noting its colourless, odourless nature when distilled. Poirot's mind raced. Had Dr. Strange suspected the vicar's death was no accident, and had that suspicion cost him his life? Returning to London, Poirot turned his attention to the guests of both dinners. He arranged to meet Lady Mary Lytton Gore at a discreet tea-shop in Mayfair, where the clink of china and the murmur of conversation provided a safe backdrop. Lady Mary, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her auburn hair pinned elegantly, greeted him with a wry smile. "Monsieur." "Poirot, I knew you'd not let this rest." 2 deaths, and both so theatrical it's like a play gone horribly wrong. Poirot inclined his head, stirring his tisane with precision. "Madame, you have a keen eye. Tell me, what did you observe at Melford that differed from Crow's Nest?" Lady Mary frowned, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "The mood was heavier," she said. "Sir Charles was charming, as always, but there was a tension in him, especially around Angela. And Dr. Strange seemed distracted, watching everyone as if he expected something to happen." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "And Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, her demeanour." Lady Mary's eyes sharpened. Nervous, she kept looking at Sir Charles, then away, as if afraid of him. "I thought it odd she's usually so poised." Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to Angela's fear. Was it of Sir Charles, or of something he represented? Next, Poirot sought out the footman from Crow's Nest, Thomas, now employed at a London club. The young man, still nervous, met Poirot in a quiet corner of the club's servants' quarters. Under gentle probing, Thomas admitted to seeing Sir Charles linger near the sideboard before the champagne was served at Crow's Nest. He was adjusting the glasses. "Sir," Thomas said, his eyes darting to the door, "I thought he was just being particular, him being so grand and all." Poirot pressed further, but Thomas insisted he saw nothing more, though his flushed cheeks suggested unease. Poirot let him go, noting the footman's loyalty to his former employer and the fear that underpinned it, determined to explore every angle. Poirot visited the London laboratory where the port from Melfort had been analysed. The chemist, a bespoke man with a penchant for precision rivaling Poirot's own, confirmed the presence of nicotine in Dr. Strange's glass. "It's a devilish substance," he said, adjusting his spectacles. A few drops can kill in minutes, and it leaves little trace unless you know to look for it. He explained that nicotine could be distilled from tobacco leaves, a process requiring some knowledge but not impossible for an amateur with access to basic equipment. Poirot's mind flashed to Sir Charles's theatrical flair. Could such a man, accustomed to crafting illusions, have mastered such a subtle art? Back at his flat, Poirot spread his notes across the dining table, creating a mosaic of clues. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, pointed to the diagram of the Crow's Nest dining room. "You think the poison was in the champagne there, too?" he asked. Poirot nodded slowly. "It is possible, mon ami." The vicar's symptoms joking, collapse mirror those of Dr. Strange. Yet the glass was clean. The poisoner is clever, Hastings, and careful. Poirot's next move was to contact Miss Muriel Wills, the spectacled playwright who had been quietly observant at both dinners. She agreed to meet him at a small bookshop in Bloomsbury, where she browsed the shelves with a distracted air. Her mousy appearance belied a sharp mind, and she spoke with a precision that impressed Poirot. "I noticed nothing specific at Crow's Nest," she said, pushing her spectacles up her nose. "But at Melfort, Dr. Strange seemed uneasy. He kept glancing at his glass before drinking, as if he suspected something." She hesitated, then added, "Sir Charles was very attentive to Angela that night, almost too attentive." Poirot's interest sharpened, and Mademoiselle Sutcliffe's response. Miss Wills shrugged. She was polite, but distant. "I've seen her on stage. She's a fine actress," but she couldn't hide her discomfort. Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to the dynamics of the group. Angela's unease, Dr. Strange's suspicions, Sir Charles's omnipresence. The threads were beginning to form a pattern, though its shape remained unclear. That evening, Poirot dined with Hastings at a quiet restaurant, using the meal to organize his thoughts. Over a plate of sole moiniere, he mused aloud. "Consider, Hastings, the choice of victims. A vicar, insignificant in worldly terms, and a doctor, respected but not powerful. Why these men? The vicar's death drew little suspicion, dismissed as natural. Dr. Strange's death, however, could not be so easily ignored. It suggests a progression, a plan escalating in boldness." Hastings chewed thoughtfully. "You think the first was a test, then, to see if it could be done?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. Victimen, the vicar, was a rehearsal, a means to perfect the method. But for what purpose? Dr. Strange's death was the true target, I suspect, and his suspicions about Crow's Nest made him dangerous. The following day, Poirot visited the theatre where Sir Charles was rehearsing his latest production. The stage was a flurry of activity, with actors reciting lines and stagehands adjusting lights. Sir Charles, in his element, directed with a commanding presence, his voice carrying across the auditorium. Poirot observed from the stalls, noting the actor's ease in controlling his environment. Could such control extend to murder? He approached Sir Charles during a break, engaging him in casual conversation about the play. "A tragedy, of course," Sir Charles said, his smile wry. "The public loves a good death scene." Poirot seized the opening. "And you, Sir Charles, do you find real tragedy as compelling?" The actor's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Real tragedy is messy, Monsieur Poirot. On stage, we can control the outcome." Poirot nodded, his mind noting the word control. It was a motif in Sir Charles's life, from his performances to his carefully curated dinners. Before leaving, Poirot spoke briefly with Angela Sutcliffe, who was rehearsing a minor role. Her golden curls were pinned up, her face pale despite her stage makeup. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I'm frightened. After Dr. Strange, I don't know who to trust." Poirot pressed gently, but she revealed little, only that Dr. Strange had warned her to be cautious around certain people. Her eyes flicked toward the stage, where Sir Charles was directing a scene. Poirot thanked her, his suspicions deepening. Back at his flat, Poirot added to his notes, drawing a line between the two deaths. The vicar's murder, if it was such, was a quiet experiment, its success emboldening the killer to target Dr. Strange, who had begun to suspect foul play. The use of nicotine, a poison requiring skill to procure, pointed to premeditation. Sir Charles, with his access to theatrical props and chemicals, was a plausible candidate, but Poirot needed evidence, not conjecture. He summoned Hastings, outlining his next steps. "We must return to Crow's Nest," he said. "There is something there, a trace of the first act that we have overlooked." Hastings groaned, dreading another journey, but Poirot's resolve was unshakable. "The truth, mon ami, lies in the details, and Hercule Poirot will find them." As night fell, Poirot sat by his fireplace, the glow illuminating his notebook. He wrote Sir Charles again, circling it. The actor was the thread connecting both tragedies, his charm a mask for something darker. But what drove him? Jealousy, ambition, or a need to dominate the stage of life? Poirot closed his notebook, his mind alight with possibilities. The threads were converging, and soon, he knew, the pattern would reveal the hand that wove it. Chapter 5. The actors masked, the London fog hung low and heavy, cloaking the city in a grey shroud that muffled sound and softened edges. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly and his scarf arranged with precision, navigated the bustling streets of the West End toward Sir Charles Cartwright's flat, in a fashionable corner of Mayfair. The building, a Georgian edifice with tall windows and rottion railings, exuded the understated elegance befitting a man of the stage. Poirot's mission was clear: to probe the character of the man who stood at the heart of two mysterious deaths, to peel back the layers of charm and uncover what lay beneath the actor's mask. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, accompanied him, though his enthusiasm was tempered by the damp chill. "I don't see why we're visiting Sir Charles Poirot," he grumbled, adjusting his hat against the mist. "He's a charming fellow, I'll grant you, but a murderer seems a stretch." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Mon cher Hastings' charm is the perfect cloak for villainy. Sir Charles is a man who lives for performance, and I suspect his greatest role is yet to be unmasked." He tapped his cane on the pavement, his eyes gleaming with purpose. The flat's interior was a shrine to Sir Charles's theatrical career. Framed posters of past triumphs adorned the walls, their bold colours and dramatic fonts proclaiming successes. In Shakespeare, Shaw, and modern dramas, a mahogany bookcase held leather-bound scripts, their spines embossed with gold, while a velvet-lined display case showcased awards and mementos: a gilded mask, a silver cigarette case, a signed photograph of a young Laurence Olivier. The air carried the faint scent of polished wood and cigar smoke, a fitting backdrop for a man who thrived on spectacle. Sir Charles greeted them with his usual flair, his silver hair catching the light of a crystal chandelier. "Monsieur Poirot." "Captain Hastings, what a delight," he exclaimed, ushering them into a plush sitting room. He wore a silk dressing gown over a tailored shirt, his ease suggesting a man at home in his own legend. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Surely not more questions about those dreadful dinners. Poirot settled into an armchair, his posture erect, his hands folded neatly. Sir Charles, I am a man who seeks clarity. The deaths of Reverend Babington and Dr. Strange, they trouble me. Two tragedies so similar, with you as the common thread. It is, you will agree, a curious coincidence. Sir Charles's smile remained, but his eyes flickered. A subtle shift, Poirot noted. Coincidence, indeed, he said, pouring brandy from a decanter. Tragic, of course, but I assure you, I'm as baffled as anyone. Poor Babington, such a gentle soul, and Bartholomew, a dear friend. I can't imagine who'd wish them harm. He offered glasses to his guests, which declined with a polite wave. Hastings accepted, sipping cautiously. Still, it's odd, don't you think? He said, both dropping dead after a toast, and you hosting one and attending the other. Makes a fellow wonder. Sir Charles laughed, a rich, theatrical sound. Captain, you sound like a detective. In one of my plays, I'm an actor, not a villain. My role is to entertain, not to harm. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, the picture of relaxed confidence. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. And yet, Sir Charles, the stage teaches us that every gesture has purpose. Tell me, what was your impression of Dr. Strange? At Melford, did he seem preoccupied? He watched the actor closely, noting the slight tightening of his jaw. Bartholomew. He was his usual self-quiet, thoughtful, Sir Charles replied, his tone smooth. Perhaps a bit distracted. But he was always buried in his medical journals. Why do you ask? Poirot's fingers traced the arm of his chair. I have learned that Dr. Strange was investigating the death at Crow's Nest. He suspected it was not natural. Did he share such thoughts with you? The actor's expression clouded, but only for a moment. He mentioned nothing of the sort. He said, we spoke of the theatre, of Angela's career. She's quite the talent, you know. His voice warmed at the mention of Angela Sutcliffe, and Poirot seized the opportunity. Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, he said, his tone light but probing. She is a protégée of yours, Nan, and of Dr. Strange, perhaps. A young actress, caught between two mentors, such a position might create tensions. Sir Charles's smile returned, but it was strained. Angela is like a daughter too. Me, he said. Bartholomew was her physician, nothing more. If there were tensions, I was unaware of them. He rose, gesturing to a framed poster of Othello. Come, let me show you my collection. This one's from my Desdemona. Day's quite a triumph. Poirot allowed the diversion, following Sir Charles to examine the memorabilia. As the actors spoke of past roles, Poirot observed his movements, the fluid gestures, the calculated pauses, the way his eyes lit up when recounting a standing ovation. It was a performance, Poirot thought, but for whose benefit? He steered the conversation back to the dinners. At Crow's Nest, Sir Charles, you handled the glasses before the champagne was served. A small task for a host, perhaps, but unusual, sir. Charles blinked, then laughed. Did I? I don't recall. I often fuss over details, habit of the trade. You're not suggesting I tampered with anything, are you? His tone was jovial, but his hand tightened on the edge of a table. Not suggesting, Sir Charles, Poirot said smoothly, merely observing. The mind of Hercule Poirot notes all details, however small. He rose, signalling to Hastings that it was time to leave. We shall not detain you further. Your rehearsal awaits, no doubt. As they descended the stairs, Hastings whispered. "He's smooth. I'll give him that. But did you see how he dodged your questions about Angela?" "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice low. "He speaks of her with warmth, but there is possession in his tone. We must speak with Mademoiselle Sutcliffe herself." The next morning, Poirot arranged to meet Angela at a quiet café near the theatre. The young actress arrived, her golden curls tucked under a closed hat, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. She greeted Poirot with a nervous smile, her fingers twisting the strap of her handbag. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm not sure why you want to see me," she said, her voice soft but strained. "I don't know anything about what happened." Poirot ordered a tisane for himself and a coffee for Angela, his demeanor gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, you were present at both tragedies. I seek only the truth. Tell me, what was your relationship with Dr. Strange?" Angela's eyes widened, then dropped to her cup. "He was my doctor and a friend. He helped me when I was starting out, gave me confidence, introduced me to directors. He was kind, not like—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "Not like Sir Charles?" Poirot prompted, his voice soft as velvet. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sir Charles is wonderful, of course. He's done so much for my career. But he can be intense. He wants to control everything, my roles, my costumes, even who I speak to. Dr. Strange warned me to be careful, to keep my independence." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did Sir Charles know of this warning?" "I don't think so," Angela said, her voice barely a whisper. "But they argued once at a rehearsal. Dr. Strange thought Sir Charles was pushing me too hard. It was just a disagreement. Nothing more." Her hands trembled, and Poirot sensed she was holding something back. He changed tack, asking about the dinners. "At Melfort, mademoiselle, you seemed uneasy. Was there something or someone you feared?" Angela's cheeks flushed. "I was just upset about Dr. Strange. It was so sudden, like poor Mr. Babington. I don't know why it keeps happening." Her voice broke, and Poirot, sensing her distress, did not press further. He thanked her, promising to keep her confidence, and watched as she hurried away, her figure swallowed by the fog. Back at his flat, Poirot sat with his notebook, adding Angela's revelations to his growing mosaic. Dr. Strange's warning, Sir Charles's possessiveness, the argument at the rehearsal, these were threads in a tapestry of motive. He suspected Sir Charles's affection for Angela was more than paternal, and Dr. Strange's influence over her had posed a threat. But the vicar's death remained a puzzle. Why kill a harmless clergyman? Was it, as Poirot had begun to suspect, a deliberate misdirection, a rehearsal for a greater crime? Hastings, pouring himself a whiskey, offered his own theory. Suppose Sir Charles fancied Angela, and she preferred Dr. Strange. Jealousy's a powerful motive, Poirot. He's an actor used to getting his way. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. Jealousy, oui, but there is more. Sir Charles is a man who craves control, and control is won through planning. The vicar's death was no accident, but a tester means to perfect the method for Dr. Strange. We must return to Crow's Nest, Hastings, to find the evidence that eluded us. As night fell, Poirot stood by his window, the fog pressing against the glass. Sir Charles's flat, Angela's fear, Dr. Strange's suspicions all pointed to a man whose charm concealed a dangerous ambition. But Poirot needed proof, a tangible, linked to the poison. He closed his notebook, his resolve firm. The actor's mask was slipping, and Hercule Poirot would ensure it fell completely. Chapter 6. The Playwrights' Clutha Strand Theatre. A grand old edifice in London's West End, hummed with the frenetic energy of rehearsal. The scent of sawdust and grease paint mingled with the faint mustiness of velvet curtains, and the stage was a chaos of half-built sets and actors reciting lines under the watchful eye of Sir Charles Cartwright. Hercule Poirot, seated in the darkened stalls, observed the scene with the precision of a conductor studying an orchestra. His visit was not for pleasure, but for purpose. Prompted by an invitation from Oliver Manders, the young playwright whose brooding demeanour and cryptic remarks at the inquest had piqued Poirot's curiosity, Captain Hastings, at Poirot's side, shifted uncomfortably in the plush seat. "I don't see why we're here, Poirot," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the clatter of a prop table being moved. "Manders is a bit of a wet blanket, but a murderer seems unlikely." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, remained fixed on the stage. "Mon cher Hastings, it is not always the loudest voice that holds the secret." Monsieur Manders noticed a bitter taste in his champagne at crow's-nested detail others overlooked. He is a witness, perhaps, to more than he knows. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work, weaving the threads of two deaths into a coherent pattern. The play, The Poisoned Chalice, was a melodrama penned by Manders and produced by Sir Charles. Its plot, as Poirot had gleaned from a programme, centred on a betrayed lover who used poison to exact revenge, a theme that struck him as more than coincidental. On stage, Angela Sutcliffe, her golden curls catching the spotlight, delivered a monologue with trembling intensity, while Sir Charles directed from the wings, his gestures precise and commanding. Poirot noted the dynamic, Angela's deference to Sir Charles, her glances seeking his approval, and his proprietary air, as if she were a prized creation. As the rehearsal broke for tea, Manders approached, his dark curls dishevelled, his eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, offering a curt nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come. Theatre's not everyone's cup of tea." His tone was casual, but his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on his script. Poirot smiled, his demeanour disarming. "Monsieur Manders, the theatre is a mirror to life, Nan, and I am a student of both. Your play intrigues me such a timely choice of poison as a weapon." He watched Manders closely, noting the slight flush that crept up the playwright's neck. "It's just fiction," Manders said quickly, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. "Poison's dramatic, that's all. Audiences love a good murder." He exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes darting toward the stage where Sir Charles was adjusting a prop. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. "At Crow's Nest, you spoke of a bitter taste in your champagne. A small detail, perhaps, but significant. Did you notice anything else that evening? Anything that seemed out of place?" Manders hesitated, his gaze flickering to Poirot, then away. "I told the inquest everything," he said. "It was a shock, the vicar collapsing like that. I didn't think much of the taste at the time, just thought the champagne was off." He paused, then added, almost reluctantly, "But I did see Sir Charles near the sideboard before dinner. He was fussing with the glasses, like he was arranging. Them didn't seem odd then, but now." He trailed off, his expression troubled. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And at Melford, did you observe Sir Charles with the port?" Perhaps Manders shook his head. "I wasn't watching him. I was talking to Angelo. She was nervous, kept looking at Dr. Strange. I thought it was just stage fright, but after—" "What happened?" He stubbed out his cigarette, his fingers restless. "Look, I don't know anything for sure. I just write plays, not crimes. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing Manders' words. The playwright's unease suggested he suspected more than he admitted, but fear or loyalty held him back. Your play, Monsieur Manders, Poirot said, changing tack. It features a poisoning scene, I understand. Was this always part of the script, or a recent addition? Manders' eyes narrowed. It was my idea originally, but Sir Charles insisted on rewriting it. Said it needed more flair. He added details about the poison. It slipped into a drink, how it acts fast. I thought he was just being dramatic. His voice carried a hint of resentment, as if Sir Charles's interference rankled. Poirot's interest sharpened. And when did he make these changes? A few weeks after Crow's Nest, Manders said, his tone flat. He said it would make the play more gripping, given recent events. He looked away, his jaw tight. Poirot thanked him, his mind racing. Sir Charles's revisions to the play, so soon after the vicar's death, suggested a mind preoccupied with poison, not as fiction, but as reality. Was it arrogance, Poirot wondered, or a deliberate taunt to weave his crimes into art? As Manders returned to the stage, Poirot and Hastings lingered to observe the rehearsal. Angela's performance was compelling, but her eyes betrayed a weariness that went beyond the demands of her role. Sir Charles, directing with relentless energy, corrected her delivery with a mix of encouragement and insistence. More passion, Angela, he called, his voice carrying across the theatre. You're dying for love, not a cold. Angela nodded, her smile strained, and Poirot sensed the weight of his influence over her. After the rehearsal, Poirot approached Angela, who was gathering her script and coat. Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, he said gently, a word, if you please. I sense you carry a burden. Will you share it with Hercule Poirot? Angela's eyes, wide and wary, met his. There's nothing to share, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm just tired, that's all. But her hands trembled as she buttoned her coat, and Poirot pressed gently. Dr. Strange was your friend, non. He warned you to be cautious. Did he speak of Sir Charles? Angela's breath caught, and she glanced toward the stage, where Sir Charles was conferring with a stagehand. He said, Sir Charles was too controlling, she admitted. He thought I should take a break, work with other producers. But Sir Charles has done so much for couldn't just leave. Her voice broke, and she looked away, her eyes glistening. Poirot nodded, his expression sympathetic. And at Melfort, Mademoiselle, did you notice anything unusual before Dr. Strange's death? She shook her head, but her hesitation was telling. I was nervous, she said. I kept thinking about Crow's Nest, how sudden it was, and Sir Charles was so attentive, pouring the port himself for some of us. I thought he was just being kind. Her voice faltered, and Poirot sensed she was on the verge of saying more, but stopped herself. He thanked her, letting her go with a reassuring smile, but his mind was alight with possibilities. Sir Charles's involvement with the drinks at both dinners, his revisions to the play. Angela's fear-all pointed to a man orchestrating events with the precision of a stage director, but the motive remained elusive. Was it jealousy over Angela's loyalty to Dr. Strange, or something deeper, a need to dominate those around him? Back at his flat, Poirot spread his notes across the dining table, his fingers tracing the connections. Hastings, pouring himself a whiskey, offered his perspective. Sounds like Sir Charles is obsessed with Angela, he said. Maybe he saw Dr. Strange as a rival, not just for her career, but for her affection. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. But the vicar's death complicates the picture. Why kill a man of no consequence? I believe, Hastings, that it was a tester rehearsal to ensure the method was flawless. Sir Charles, with his theatrical mind, would see the beauty in such a plan. Hastings frowned. But why invite you to both dinners? If he's the killer, he's practically daring you to catch him. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Exactement, mon ami. It is the arrogance of the artist to believe he can outwit even Hercule Poirot, but he underestimates the little grey cells. He tapped his temple, his resolve firm. Poirot decided his next step was to revisit Crow's Nest, to search for physical evidence of the first murder. He telephoned Sir Charles's housekeeper, arranging a visit under the pretext of retrieving a forgotten item from the dinner. He also requested a meeting with the Home Office chemist to discuss the feasibility of nicotine poisoning in the vicar's case. Given the clean glass, the chemist's expertise would clarify whether the poison could have been administered in a way that left no trace. As evening fell, Poirot sat by his fireplace, the glow casting shadows across his notebook. He sketched a timeline of the two deaths, marking Sir Charles's actions, arranging glasses at Crow's Nest, pouring port at Melfort, rewriting the play with its telltale poisoning scene. The playwright's clue, though small, was significant. Manders' observation of Sir Charles's behaviour, coupled with the script changes, suggested a mind that revelled in the artistry of murder. Poirot closed his notebook, his thoughts turning to Angela. Her fear, her reluctance to speak fully, hinted at a deeper conflict. Was she merely a pawn in Sir Charles's game, or did she know more than she admitted? And Manders, with his restless demeanour and sharp observations, might yet prove a key witness or a suspect. If his resentment of Sir Charles ran deeper than it seemed. The fog outside thickened, pressing against the windows like a curtain. Poirot rose, his mind clear despite the complexity of the case. The threads were tightening, the pattern emerging. Sir Charles's mask was intricate, but Hercule Poirot was determined to tear it away, revealing the truth beneath. Chapter 7. The Poisons. Pathysy air at Lumouth was sharp and bracing, carrying the tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped from the train onto the platform. The village, nestled against the cliffs, seemed untouched by the tragedy that had unfolded at Crow's Nest 3 months prior. Its cottages and cobbled streets bathed in the pale light of a winter morning. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned tightly and his hat tilted against the wind, led the way towards Sir Charles Cartwright's seaside manor, his cane tapping a determined rhythm on the path. Hastings, bundled in a woolen scarf, cast a sceptical glance at his friend. "I don't see what we'll find here, Poirot," he said, his breath clouding in the chill air. "The police combed the place after Babington's death. If there was anything to find, they'd have it by now." Eyes gleamed, undeterred. "Mon cher Hastings, the police see with their eyes, but Hercule Poirot sees with his little grey cells. The truth lies in the details they overlook. At Crow's Nest, the first act of this tragedy was played, and I am certain a trace of it remains." He quickened his pace, his mind already mapping the dining room where Reverend Babington had met his end. Crow's Nest stood as imposing as ever, its whitewashed walls stark against the grey sea beyond. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lecky, a wiry woman with a pinched face, greeted them with guarded courtesy, her eyes flickering with unease at the mention of the vicar's death. "Sir Charles ain't here," she said, leading them into the hall. "He's in London, rehearsing. But you're welcome to look around, Monsieur Poirot. if it's to do with that dreadful business." Poirot thanked her, his manner impeccable, and requested access to the dining room. The room was much as he remembered. The long mahogany table, the chandelier's crystal prisms, the sideboard where the champagne glasses had been prepared. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax in disuse, the curtains drawn against the winter light. Poirot moved with purpose, his gloved hands tracing the edges of the sideboard, his eyes scanning every inch. "Tell me, Madame Lecky," he said, his voice conversational, "on the night of the dinner, did you see Sir Charles handle the glasses before they were served?" The housekeeper frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was in the kitchen, mostly," she said, "but I did see him fussing about the sideboard, arranging things. He's particular, Sir Charles, likes everything just so, I thought. He was setting out the glasses himself to save Thomas the trouble." Poirot nodded, filing away her words. "And the tray of glasses, did it remain unattended at any time?" Mrs. Lecky hesitated, her brow furrowing. "I suppose it might have been, for a moment. Thomas fetched the champagne from the cellar, and I was checking the table settings. Sir Charles was in and out, talking to the guests. I didn't think nothing of it." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of satisfaction. A moment unattended was all a clever hand would need. He turned his attention to the sideboard, its polished surface reflecting the dim light. He opened its doors, examining the shelves within, then ran his fingers along the inner panels. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and a small section of wood sprang open, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a cigarette case. Inside lay a tiny glass vial, empty but bearing a faint, acrid scent that Poirot recognized at once. Tobacco, distilled to its deadliest essence. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, let out a low whistle. "Good Lord, Poirot, is that what I think it is?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is, mon ami, the vessel of death. Nicotine, I suspect, though we shall have it tested." The poisoner was careful, but not careful enough. He wrapped the vial in a handkerchief, tucking it into his pocket, and closed the compartment with care. The discovery confirmed his suspicion. The vicar's death was no accident, but a calculated act, executed with the precision of a stage effect. Leaving Crow's Nest, Poirot arranged for the vial to be sent to the Home Office chemist, with instructions to test for nicotine residue. He and Hastings returned to London, where Poirot sought out Dr. Frederick Hale, a chemist friend renowned for his expertise in toxicology. They met in a cluttered laboratory near St. Bartholomew's Hospital, where the air was sharp with the scent of chemicals and the shelves groaned under the weight of glassware and textbooks. Dr. Hale, a wiry man with a shock of white hair and a brisk manner, greeted Poirot with a nod. "Nicotine, you say?" he mused, adjusting his spectacles. "Nasty stuff. A few drops can stop the heart in minutes convulsions, choking, collapse, just as you described. It's colorless, nearly odorless when pure, and devilishly hard to detect unless you're looking for it." Poirot leaned forward, his voice intent. "And how might one obtain such a poison, doctor? Is it within the reach of, say, an amateur with a flair for the dramatic?" Hale chuckled, setting down a beaker. "Not easily, but not impossible. Tobacco leaves, boiled down with the right equipment, can yield a crude distillate. A chemist, a doctor, or someone with access to theatrical supplies might manage it. The trick is handling it safely. Too much exposure, and you're dead yourself." Poirot's mind flashed to Sir Charles's flat, with its array of theatrical props and chemicals used for stage effects. An actor with his resources and knowledge could, with study, produce such a poison? And the delivery, Dr. Poirot asked. Could it be slipped into a glass without leaving a trace? Hale nodded. A drop or two in champagne or port would do it. The alcohol masks the taste, especially if the victim isn't expecting it. The glass would need to be rinsed quickly, though, or the residue might show. Poirot thanked him, his thoughts racing. The clean glass at Crow's Nest suggested the poisoner had acted swiftly, perhaps rinsing the vicar's glass in the chaos of his collapse. At Melfort, the port's acrid scent had been noted, but the bottle was clean, pointing to the glass as the vehicle. Sir Charles, with his access to the drinks at both dinners, remained the prime suspect. But the motivi, a harmless vicar, why a respected doctor, eluded him. Back at his flat, Poirot spread his notes across the table, the vial's discovery. A new piece in the puzzle. Hastings, sipping tea, watched with interest. You think Sir Charles hid that vial at Crow's Nest? He asked. Bit careless, leaving it there. Careless or confident, Poirot replied, his fingers steepled. A man like Sir Charles believes himself untouchable, a master of his stage. The vial was hidden well only. The little grey cells of Hercule Poirot could find it. He paused, his eyes narrowing. But the vicar's death troubles me. Why? Him, a man of no enemies, no wealth, no secrets. Unless, Hastings leaned forward. Unless what? Unless he was not the target, Poirot said, his voice low. Consider, mon ami, a rehearsal. The vicar's death tested the method nicotine, a swift poison, delivered in a toast. It drew little suspicion, dismissed as a heart attack. But Dr. Strange, with his inquiries, became a threat. His death was the true performance. Hastings frowned. But why invite you to both dinners? If Sir Charles is the killer, he's practically begging to be caught. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Arrogance, Hastings. The artist believes his work flawless, his audience too dull to see the truth. But Hercule Poirot is no ordinary audience. He tapped his notebook, where Sir Charles's name was circled in bold ink, determined to test his theory. Poirot contacted Inspector Crossfield, the Yorkshire policeman handling Dr. Strange's case. He shared the discovery of the vial, urging a discreet search of Sir Charles's London flat for similar evidence. Crossfield, gruff but cooperative, agreed to arrange it, though he warned that Sir Charles's influence might complicate matters. He's a big name, Monsieur Poirot, Crossfield said. We'll need solid proof. Poirot also reached out to Lady Mary Lytton Gore, inviting her to his flat for tea. Her sharp observations had proven valuable, and he hoped she might recall further details. She arrived promptly, her navy coat dusted with frost, her blue eyes alight with curiosity. Monsieur Poirot, she said, settling into an armchair. I've been thinking about Melfort. There was something odd about the port service. Sir Charles insisted on pouring for Dr. Strange himself, said it was a special vintage. I thought it was just his usual theatrics, but now Poirot's interest sharpened, and you saw no one else handle the glass. She shook her head. The footman brought the tray, but Sir Charles took over. He was very particular about it. Her voice carried a note of suspicion, mirroring Poirot's own. Evening fell. Poirot sat by his fireplace, the vial's discovery burning in his mind. The poison's path was clear. Nicotine, hidden in a glass, delivered with the precision of a stage cue. Sir Charles, with his access, his control, his flair for drama, was the architect of this tragedy. But the vigilance, ambition, or something darker remained just out of reach. Poirot closed his notebook, his resolve unyielding. The stage was set for the next act, and he would not rest until the curtain fell on the truth. Chapter 8. The motive unravelled. The London winter pressed its chill against the windows of Hercule Poirot's flat, where the fire cast a warm glow over the polished furniture and neatly arranged bookshelves. Poirot sat at his desk, his notebook open, his pen poised over a page filled with diagrams and circled names. The discovery of the vial at Crow's Nest had confirmed his suspicions of poison, but the motive behind the deaths of Reverend Babington and Dr. Bartholomew Strange remained, a shadow just beyond his grasp. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair with a glass of whisky, watched his friend with a mix of admiration and impatience. "You've got the vial, Poirot," he said, swirling his drink. "You've got Sir Charles handling the glasses at both dinners. What more do you need? It's clear he's our man." Poirot's moustache twitched, his grey-green eyes narrowing. "Clear, mon ami. The evidence points to Sir Charles, oui, but evidence is the skeleton, not the soul of a crime. The motive, this is what eludes Hercule Poirot. Why a harmless victim? Why a respected doctor? Until we understand the why, we cannot be certain of the who." He tapped his pen on the notebook, his mind sifting through the threads of the case, determined to unravel the motive. Poirot turned to Lady Mary Littengore, whose sharp wit and keen observations had proven invaluable. He invited her to a quiet luncheon at a discreet restaurant near Russell Square, where the clink of cutlery and murmur of conversation provided a shield for their discussion. Lady Mary arrived, her auburn hair swept beneath a stylish hat, her blue eyes alight with curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, settling into her chair, "I've been expecting your call. This business with Sir Charles, it's like a play with too many twists." Poirot smiled, stirring his coffee with precision. "Madame, you see the stage as I do. Tell me, what whispers have you heard about Sir Charles and Mademoiselle Sutcliffe? There is a tension there, Nan." Lady Mary's expression grew serious. "There's talk in theatrical circles," she said, lowering her voice. "Sir Charles is besotted with Angela, but not in a fatherly way, as he claims. He proposed to her last summer, you know, quite publicly at a cast party. She refused him, politely, but it stung. And Dr. Strange, he was her confidant, almost a mentor. Some say Sir Charles resented how close they were." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this resentment, did it show itself?" Lady Mary nodded. "At rehearsals, Sir Charles would snap at Angela if she mentioned Dr. Strange's advice. Once, I overheard him say something cutting about interfering doctors. It was petty, but there was a coldness in his tone I hadn't heard before." She paused, sipping her wine. "And there's more. Angela told me, Dr. Strange warned her about Sir Charles's temper, said he could be dangerous when crossed." This revelation struck Poirot like a spark. Jealousy, then, was the thread that tied the deaths together. Sir Charles, a man accustomed to commanding the stage and those around him, could not tolerate a rival for Angela's affection or loyalty. Dr. Strange, with his influence over her, had become a threat not just to Sir Charles's ambitions but to his pride. But the vicar's death remained an anomaly, a piece that did not fit. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but intent. "Madame, at Crow's Nest, did you notice any connection between Sir Charles and Reverend Babington? A glance, a word, anything that suggested a purpose?" Lady Mary frowned, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. "Nothing specific," she said. The vicar was so unassuming, almost invisible among the grander guests. "But Sir Charles, did make a point of toasting him during the champagne, calling him a man of quiet virtue. It seemed kind, but now I wonder if it was deliberate drawing attention to him. Poirot's mind raced. The toast, the focus on the vicar. Could it have been a calculated misdirection, a way to ensure the death appeared random? He thanked Lady Mary, his thoughts already turning to his next step. The motive was crystallizing. Sir Charles, driven by jealousy and a need for control, had targeted Dr. Strange. But the vicar's death was a prelude, a test to perfect the method. The audacity of such a plan, executed under Poirot's nose, was both a challenge and an insult to his little grey cells. Returning to his flat, Poirot telephoned Inspector Crossfield in Yorkshire, inquiring about the search of Sir Charles's London flat. The inspector's voice was gruff with frustration. "We found nothing, Monsieur Poirot. No vials, no chemicals, nothing to link him to nicotine. His staff swears he's been in rehearsals non-stop. He's slippery, I'll give you that." Poirot was undeterred. "Slippery, oui, but not invisible. The evidence is there, Inspector, hidden in plain sight. I shall find it." He hung up, his resolve firm, and turned to his notes. The vial from Crow's Nest, the nicotine in Dr. Strange's glass, Sir Charles's presence at both scenes all pointed to a single hand, but the absence of physical evidence in London suggested a meticulous mind, one that anticipated scrutiny, determined to test his theory. Poirot arranged to meet Oliver Manders again, this time at a quiet pub near the Strand Theatre. The playwright arrived, his dark curls damp from the drizzle, his expression wary. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, sliding into a booth, "I'm not sure what else I can tell you. I've said all I know about those dinners." Poirot's smile was disarming. "Monsieur Manders, you are a writer, a man who sees the undercurrents of human behavior. Tell me, what is your impression of Sir Charles's relationship with Mademoiselle Sutcliffe?" Manders lit a cigarette, his fingers steady but his eyes guarded. "He's obsessed with her," he said bluntly. "Calls her his muse, but is more than that. He watches her like she's his creation, not a person. She's scared of him, though she'd never say it outright. Dr. Strange saw it. Too, he tried to get her to leave the production, take a role elsewhere. Poirot's interest sharpened, and Sir Charles knew of this advice." Manders nodded, exhaling a plume of smoke. He overheard them talking once, at a rehearsal. Godefroy didn't shout, but you could see it in his eyes. He doesn't like being challenged, not by anyone. He paused, then added, "Angela's been different since Dr. Strange died. Quieter, jumpier. I think she's afraid of what he might do next." Poirot filed away this confirmation of Sir Charles's possessiveness, his mind turning to the vicar's death. "At Crow's Nest, monsieur. Manders, you noted a bitter taste in your champagne. Did you see anyone else react to their drink? Perhaps the vicar himself?" Manders frowned, crushing his cigarette in an ashtray. "I wasn't watching him closely, but I remember him wincing after his first sip, like it was unpleasant. I thought, he just didn't like champagne. He was a teetotaler, you know. Didn't make much of it at the time." This detail, small but significant, reinforced Poirot's theory. The vicar's death was no random act. It was a calculated step, chosen for its very insignificance. A man with no enemies, no wealth, no secrets. His death would draw minimal scrutiny. A perfect trial for the poison's efficacy. Dr. Strange, however, was the true target. His suspicions about Crow's Nest making him a danger to the killers. Plan Poirot thanked Manders, his thoughts coalescing into a clear picture. The motive was rooted in Sir Charles's obsession with control over his career, his productions, and Angela Sutcliffe. Dr. Strange's influence threatened that control, and his death was the culmination of a carefully staged performance. The vicar's murder, Poirot now believed, was a dress rehearsal, a test to ensure the poison worked swiftly and silently, leaving no trace unless one knew to look. Determined to close the net, Poirot contacted the Home Office chemist to confirm. The analysis of the vial from Crow's Nest, the report delivered that afternoon, was unequivocal. Traces of nicotine, identical to that found in Dr. Strange's glass. The link was undeniable, but Sir Charles's careful disposal of evidence in London suggested he anticipated investigation. Poirot needed more than circumstantial proof to confront a man of such influence. He decided to stage a final gathering, a recreation of the Crow's Nest dinner, to test his theory and provoke a reaction. He telephoned Sir Charles, inviting him and the surviving guests, Lady Mary, Oliver Manders, Miss Muriel Wills, and the others, to a private dinner at a London hotel. Under the pretense of discussing the tragedies and honouring the victims, Sir Charles accepted with his usual charm, though Poirot detected a note of wariness in his voice. "A splendid idea, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "A chance to put these dreadful events behind us." Poirot smiled into the receiver. "Oui, Sir Charles, a chance to bring clarity to the shadows." He hung up, his plan taking shape. The dinner would be his stage, and he would direct the final act, forcing the killer to reveal himself through the pressure of scrutiny. Back at his flat, Poirot reviewed his notes, his diagram of the two dining tables now annotated with every detail: the toast at Crow's Nest, the port at Melford, the vial, the rewritten play. He added a new heading, motive. Beneath it, he wrote jealousy, control, pride. Sir Charles, he believed, had killed to preserve his dominion over Angela and his reputation, eliminating a rival who dared to challenge him. The vicar's death was a cold, calculated experiment, its success paving the way for the main event. Hastings, watching from his armchair, shook his head. "It's diabolical, Poirot. To kill a man like Babington just to test the poison, it's monstrous." "Monstrous," Poirot agreed, his voice grave. "But to a mind like Sir Charles's, it is art. He sees life as a stage, and he is the star. But Hercule Poirot will rewrite the ending." He closed his notebook, the firelight flickering across his face. The motive was unravelled, the stage set. The final act awaited, and Poirot would ensure the curtain fell on truth. Chapter 9. The final act. The private dining room of the Savoy Hotel in London gleamed with understated elegance, its cream-coloured walls adorned with gilt-framed mirrors that reflected the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. The long table, draped in crisp white linen, was set for 10, each place marked with polished silver and delicate china, a deliberate echo of the fatal dinners at Crow's Nest and Melford Abbey. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a black dinner jacket, stood at the head of the room, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, his grey-green eyes scanning the arriving guests with the precision of a director before the curtain rises. Tonight, he would stage his own performance, designed to unmask the killer who had orchestrated 2 murders with theatrical flair. Captain Hastings, adjusting his tie with a nervous tug, stood by Poirot's side. "I hope you know what you're doing, Poirot," he whispered, his voice tinged with unease. "Bringing them all together like this sits like tempting fate." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Fate, mon ami, is a script written by men, and Hercule Poirot rewrites the ending when it is unjust. Tonight we shall see the truth revealed. He tapped his cane lightly on the parquet floor, his mind a whirl of calculated moves. The guests arrived, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Sir Charles Cartwright entered first, his silver hair gleaming, his smile as polished as ever, though his eyes held a wary glint. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice rich with theatrical warmth, "a bold choice, this dinner. A tribute to our lost friends, I presume." Poirot inclined his head, his expression enigmatic, noting the actor's careful composure. Lady Mary Lytton Gore followed, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her navy gown understated yet commanding. She met Poirot's gaze with a nod, her blue eyes conveying silent support. Angela Sutcliffe, pale and fragile in a dove-grey dress, clung to the arm of Oliver Manders, whose brooding demeanour seemed heightened by the occasion. Miss Muriel Wills, her spectacles glinting, carried a small notebook, her mousy air belied by the sharp glance she cast around the room. The remaining guests, Mr. Satterthwaite, the barrister, Colonel Arbuthnot, the retired soldier, and Mrs. Dacres, the society matron, filled the table, their presence completing the cast of that first fateful night at Crow's Nest, minus the tragic absences of Reverend Babington and Dr. Strange. The meal began with a delicate consomme, served by discreet waiters who moved like shadows. Poirot, seated at the head, guided the conversation with ease, steering it toward the theatre, a topic sure to engage Sir Charles. "The stage," he said, his voice carrying a deliberate cadence, "is a place where truth and illusion dance together. Would you not agree, Sir Charles, that a great actor can make even the darkest deed appear noble?" Sir Charles laughed, raising his glass of wine. "Well put, Monsieur Poirot. The stage is a world of make-believe, where we craft truth from lies, but I assure you, my deeds are confined to the footlights." His tone was light, but his fingers tightened briefly on the stem of his glass, a detail Poirot noted as the main course roast pheasant with a Madeira sauce was served. Poirot shifted the conversation to the tragedies. "It is curious, is it not," he said, his eyes sweeping the table, "that two men, so different, should meet their ends in such similar ways? A toast, a sip, a collapse. It is almost theatrical." A hush fell over the room. Angela's fork clattered against her plate, and Oliver Manders's jaw tightened. Lady Mary's gaze was steady, encouraging Poirot to continue. Sir Charles leaned back, his smile unwavering. "A grim coincidence," he said. "But surely you don't suggest foul play, Monsieur Poirot? The inquest cleared poor Babington. Death as natural, and Bartholomew. The police are still investigating." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The police, they seek evidence, but Hercule Poirot seeks the truth, and the truth, mes amis, lies in the pattern." He rose, his small frame commanding the room, and began to pace slowly, his cane tapping a rhythm. At Crow's Nest, Reverend Babington, a man of no enemies, dies after a toast. His glass is clean, yet he winces at the taste. At Melford, Dr. Strange, a man of keen mind, falls after sipping port laced with nicotine. The bottle is clean, but the glass betrays the poison. And at both dinners, one man is present, orchestrating the scene with the skill of a master. All eyes turned to Sir Charles, whose smile faltered but held. "You flatter me, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth. "But I'm an actor, not a magician. I couldn't make poison appear from thin air." Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze locking on to Sir Charles. Nan, but you could make it disappear. A vial, hidden in a secret compartment at Crow's Nest, bore the scent of nicotine. A drop in a glass, a swift rinse in the chaos of death simple. For a man with your dexterity, he produced the handkerchief-wrapped vial from his pocket, holding it aloft. A gasp rippled through the guests, and Angela's hand flew to her. Mouth Sir Charles's face remained impassive, though his eyes darkened. A vial, interesting, but hardly proof. Anyone could have hidden it there. Poirot nodded, as if conceding the point. Anyone. But let us consider the motive. Dr. Strange was a threat, was he not? A man who suspected the truth about Crow's Nest, who warned Mademoiselle Sutcliffe to guard her independence. A man who stood between you and the object of your affection. Angela's eyes widened, her voice trembling. No, it can't be true. Sir Charles reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her face pale. Poirot continued, his voice relentless, and the vicar, a harmless man, chosen not for who he was, but for what he was not. No enemies, no suspicioner, perfect rehearsal for your true target. You tested the poison, perfected the method, and ensured the world saw only a heart attack. But Dr. Strange's inquiries made him dangerous, and so he had to die. Sir Charles laughed, a hollow sound. This is absurd, Poirot. You're spinning a tale worthy of the stage, but it's fiction. I loved Bartholomew like a brother, and Angelucci's my protégé, nothing more. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Fiction, you say. Yet your play, The Poisoned Chalice, tells a different story. A rewritten scene, added after Crow's Nest, detailing a poisoning so precise it mirrors these crimes. You could not resist weaving your triumph into art, could you? The room was silent, the guests frozen, their eyes darting between Poirot and Sir Charles. Lady Mary's expression was grim. Oliver Manders's fists clenched, and Miss Wills scribbled furiously in her notebook. Sir Charles rose, his face a mask of indignation. You accuse me without proof, Poirot. I demand evidence, not theatrics. Poirot's smile was cold. Evidence, Sir Charles. The vial, the nicotine in Dr. Strange's glass, your presence at both scenes. Your revisions to the play, these are threads in a tapestry of guilt. And your motive, jealousy, pride, the need to control Mademoiselle Sutcliffe's heart and career, these are the colours that complete it. Sir Charles's composure wavered, his hands gripping the table. You have nothing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Angela, tears streaming down her face, stood abruptly, backing away from him. Did you kill them? She whispered. Poirot stepped forward, his voice soft but unyielding. Confess, Sir Charles. The stage is yours, but the audience sees through your mask. The actor's shoulders slumped, his face a study in defeat. But he said nothing, his silence louder than any denial. Poirot signalled to Inspector Crossfield, who had been waiting discreetly in the hall, and 2 constables entered, their presence a stark contrast to the elegance of the room, as Sir Charles was led away. The guests erupted in murmurs, their shock palpable. Poirot raised a hand for silence. The truth, mes amis, is a bitter wine, but it must be tasted. The play is over, and justice takes the stage. Hastings, his face pale, leaned close to Poirot. You were magnificent, Poirot, but how did you know he'd crack? Poirot's eyes twinkled. He did not crack, mon ami. His silence was his confession. A man like Sir Charles cannot resist the spotlight, even when it burns. He turned to the guests, his voice gentle. Go now, and let us honour the dead with peace. As the room emptied, Poirot stood alone, his cane resting lightly in his hand. The final act had played out, but the curtain had not yet fallen. There was one more scene to write, one final reckoning to ensure the truth endured. Chapter 10. The Confession. The air in the small, oak-panelled room at Scotland Yard was thick with tension, its bare walls and single window offering little comfort under the harsh glare of an overhead lamp. Hercule Poirot sat at a plain wooden table, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly before him, his grey-green eyes fixed on Sir Charles Cartwright. The actor, no longer the commanding figure of the stage, sat opposite, his silver hair slightly dishevelled, his tailored suit creased from a night in custody. Inspector Crossfield stood by the door, arms crossed, his gruff demeanour softened by a flicker of curiosity as he observed the confrontation. Captain Hastings, seated beside Poirot, shifted uncomfortably, his loyalty to his friend warring with his unease at the scene unfolding. The dinner at the Savoy had ended in Sir Charles's arrest, his silence in the face of Poirot's accusations, a tacit admission of guilt. Yet Poirot knew that silence was not enough. A confession, clear and unequivocal, was needed to seal the case. The little Belgian leaned forward, his voice calm but relentless, like a tide eroding a cliff. "Sir Charles," he began, "the stage is set, and the audience awaits. You have played your role with brilliance, but the final scene requires truth. Will you not speak?" Sir Charles's eyes, once alight with theatrical charm, were shadowed with defiance. He leaned back, his lips curling in a faint, sardonic smile. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice steady despite his circumstances, "you've spun a fine tale, worthy of the West End, but tales are not proof. You have your vial, your theories, but where is the evidence that I wielded the poison?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his unyielding resolve. "The evidence, Sir Charles, is in the pattern of your actions. At Crow's Nest, you arranged the glasses, a task beneath a host of your stature. Yet you ensured Reverend Babington's held a fatal drop of nicotine. At Melford, you poured the port for Dr. Strange, a gesture of courtesy that masked murder. The vial, hidden in a secret compartment, bears the scent of your crime. And your play, The Poisoned Chalice, its rewritten scene mirrors the method with such precision that only the author of both could have penned it." Sir Charles's smile wavered, but he shook his head. "Circumstance, Poirot. You weave a net of coincidence, but it will not hold. I am an actor, not a chemist. Nicotine, I wouldn't know where to begin." Poirot's eyes gleamed undeterred. "Nan, Sir Charles, you underestimate yourself. The theatre is a world of illusion, and you, a master of its arts, have access to chemicals for stage effect, solvents, dyes, and yes, with study, the means to distill nicotine from tobacco. A few leaves, a simple apparatus, and a mind as meticulous as yours could produce a poison invisible to all but the most discerning." Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected, "Come now, Sir Charles, you can't keep up this act forever. 2 men are dead, and you were there both times, hovering over the drinks. Why not come clean?" Sir Charles's gaze flicked to Hastings, a flash of contempt in his eyes. "Captain, you see the world in black and white. I live in shades of grey, where motive and method are not so easily pinned." He turned back to Poirot, his voice hardening. "You accuse me of killing a vicar for practice and a doctor for jealousy. It's a compelling script, but you forget I am a man of the stage, not a monster." Poirot leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying the weight of certainty. A monster, Nan, but a man consumed by pride and passion. Mademoiselle Sutcliffe, she was your muse, your creation, yet she turned to Dr. Strange for guidance, rejecting your affection. This you could not bear. Dr. Strange, with his suspicions about Crow's Nest, became a threat to your carefully crafted world. And so you planned a performance in 3 acts. The first, a test on a harmless vicar to perfect the poison. The second, the elimination of your rival. And the third, your belief that you could outwit justice itself. Sir Charles's composure cracked, his hands clenching on the table. Angela, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. You think I killed for her? She's a child, a talent I nurtured. I wanted only to protect her, to guide her, protect her. Poirot's tone was sharp now, cutting through the actors. Defenses, you sought to possess her, Sir Charles. Her refusal wounded your pride, and Dr. Strange's influence threatened your control. You could not tolerate a rival, not in love, not in art, and so you staged your murders with the flair of a tragedian, believing yourself untouchable. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint tick of a clock on the wall. Sir Charles's face was a mask, but beneath it, Poirot saw the strain, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of fear in his eyes. The actor leaned forward, his voice barely audible. You're clever, Poirot, too clever. Suppose I did it, suppose I planned it all, as you say. The vicar was nothing, a nobody, the perfect test. No one would suspect murder for a man like him. And Bartholomew, he was meddling, filling Angela's head with doubts. He had to go. Hastings gasped, but Poirot remained still, his gaze unyielding. Continue, Sir Charles. The stage is yours. Sir Charles's laugh was bitter, his defiance crumbling. It was perfect, don't you see? A drop in the glass, a quick rinse, while everyone panicked. Child's play for a man who knows timing. The vicar's death was a rehearsal, flawless in its simplicity. Bartholomew's was the masterpiece, precise. I poured his port, watched him drink, knowing he'd never interfere again. His voice rose, tinged with a strange pride. And you, Poirot, you were my audience, invited to witness my genius and never see the truth. Poirot's expression was grave. Your genius, Sir Charles, was your downfall. You could not resist the flourish, the rewritten play, the toast to the vicar, the invitation to a detective. Your pride demanded an audience, and that was your mistake. Sir Charles slumped back, the fight draining from him. What now, Poirot? You've won your little game. Will you see me hang? Inspector Crossfield stepped forward, his voice firm. That's for the courts, Sir Charles. But you've said enough to ensure they'll hear it. He signalled to the constables outside, who entered to escort the actor away, as Sir Charles was led out, his shoulders bowed but his head still held high. Poirot turned to Hastings. It is done, mon ami. The confession is complete. The curtain falls. Hastings shook his head, his face pale. I can't believe he admitted it, Poirot. All that for Angela. It's madness. Madness, perhaps, Poirot said softly, but also human. The heart, when wounded, can drive a man to monstrous acts. Sir Charles saw himself as the hero of his own tragedy, but he wrote a script of ruin. They left the room, the echo of Sir Charles's confession lingering in the air. Poirot's steps were measured, his mind already turning to the aftermath. The case was solved, but the cost to lives lost, a young woman's trust shattered, weighed heavily. He glanced at Hastings, offering a faint smile. "Come, mon ami. Let us return to the world of the living, where justice, though bitter, restores order." As they stepped into the grey London morning, Poirot's thoughts lingered on the stage of Crow's Nest and Melfort, where a man's pride had played out its deadly drama. The confession was secured, but the final act, he knew, would belong to those left behind to heal and move forward under the shadow of truth. Chapter 11. The Aftermath. The London sky was a sombre grey, heavy with the promise of rain, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped out of Scotland Yard into the bustling street. The confession of Sir Charles Cartwright, secured in the stark confines of the interrogation room, still echoed in Poirot's mind. A grim finale to a tragedy played out across 2 dinner parties. The air carried the sharp bite of winter, and Poirot adjusted his scarf with meticulous care, his grey-green eyes distant yet resolute. Hastings, walking beside him, tugged his coat closer, his face a mixture of relief and unease. "Well, Poirot," he said, his breath clouding in the chill, "you've done it again. Sir Charles, behind bars, the case solved. But I can't say it feels like a victory." Poirot's moustache twitched, his expression grave. "Victory, mon ami, is not always a matter of triumph. 2 lives lost, a young woman's trust broken, these are the costs of truth. Hercule Poirot restores order, but the heart mourns the chaos that precedes it." He tapped his cane on the pavement, his thoughts turning to the survivors of this grim drama. They made their way to a quiet tea-room near Trafalgar Square, its warm interior a welcome contrast to the bleak day. Over a pot of tisane for Poirot and a strong tea for Hastings, they reflected on the case's resolution. The surviving guests from the fatal dinners, Sutcliffe, Lady Mary, Littengore, Oliver Manners, and the others had been informed of Sir Charles's arrest, their reactions a tapestry of shock, relief, and sorrow. Poirot had arranged to meet Lady Mary and Angela later that day, hoping to offer closure and gauge their state of mind at the tea-room. Hastings stirred his tea, his brow furrowed. "I thought Manders might be our man for a while, you know," he admitted. All that brooding, and he noticed the bitter taste at Crow's Nest, seemed suspicious. Poirot chuckled softly, sipping his tisane. "Mon cher Hastings, your instincts are admirable, but they lack finesse. Monsieur Manders is a man of temperament, not malice." His bitterness was that of an artist chafing under Sir Charles's control, not a murderer plotting death. The taste, he noted, was a clue. Oui, but it pointed to Sir Charles, not himself. Hastings nodded, chastened but curious. "And Angela? Poor girl looked like she'd seen a ghost at the Savoy. Do you think she suspected Sir Charles all along?" Poirot's eyes softened. "Mademoiselle Sutcliffe is a victim of this tragedy, though. She lives." She sensed Sir Charles's obsession, his need to dominate her. But love and gratitude blinded her to his darkness. Dr. Strange's warnings planted doubt, but it was our gathering that forced her to see the truth. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Mary Littengore, her navy coat dusted with raindrops, her auburn hair slightly damp beneath her hat. She greeted them with a weary smile, settling into a chair with a grace that belied her evident exhaustion. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "I heard about Sir Charles. It's almost too much to believe. He was so charming, so larger than life, to think he could do such things." Poirot inclined his head, his expression sympathetic. "Madame, The charm of a man like Sir Charles is a mask worn to conceal a heart consumed by pride and jealousy. You were instrumental in revealing that truth. Your observations, your candor, they guided me to the solution. Lady Mary's eyes glistened, but she held her composure. I feel responsible, somehow, she said. I saw the tension between him and Angela, the way he watched her. I should have spoken sooner. Poirot raised a hand, his voice gentle. Nan, Madame, you could not have known. The mind of a murderer is a labyrinth, and even the keenest eye may not see its depths until the moment is right. You have done a great service, and for that I thank you. She managed a small smile, then rose to leave, promising to keep in touch. As she departed, Angela Sutcliffe arrived, her golden curls hidden beneath a cloached hat, her face pale and drawn. She hesitated at the table, her eyes redrimmed from tears. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you, or if I should. Everything feels broken. Poirot gestured for her to sit, ordering a coffee to steady her nerves. Mademoiselle, the truth is a bitter medicine, but it heals. Sir Charles's actions were not your fault. You were his muse, but also his prisoner. Now you are free. Angela's hands shook as she clutched her cup. I trusted him, she whispered. He gave me my first role, believed in me when no one else did. But Dr. Strange, he saw what I couldn't. He told me to be careful, to find my own path, and now he's gone because of me. Poirot's voice was firm yet kind. Nan, mademoiselle, not because of you, Sir Charles's jealousy, his need. Two controls, these were his demons, not yours. Dr. Strange died to protect you, and his memory honors your strength. What will you do now? Angela's eyes met his, a flicker of resolve breaking through her grief. I'm leaving the theatre, she said. I can't bear it anymore, not after this. I'll go to the country, perhaps teach or write. Something quiet, away from the stage. She paused, then added, I'm grateful, Monsieur Poirot. You've given me a chance to start again. Poirot nodded, his heart heavy but satisfied. Then go, mademoiselle, and find peace. The world is wide, and your talent will find a new stage. As Angela left, Hastings leaned back, his tea forgotten. Poor girl, he said, she carry this for years. And the others, Manders, Miss Wills, the lot, they'll never look at a dinner party the same way. Poirot's lips curved in a wistful smile. Such is the shadow of truth, mon ami. It lingers, but it also frees. The guests of Crow's Nest and Melfort will heal, each in their way, and we have ensured that justice prevails. They left the tea-room, stepping into the drizzle that had begun to fall. Poirot arranged to meet Inspector Crossfield later to finalize the case's details, ensuring Sir Charles's confession was properly documented. The evidence, the vial, the nicotine analysis, the testimony of the guests would secure a conviction. Though Poirot took no pleasure in it, the cost of 2 lives, the shattering of trust, weighed heavily against the triumph of resolution. As they walked toward Poirot's flat, Hastings ventured one last question. Do you think Sir Charles meant to kill again, Poirot? If you hadn't stopped him? Poirot paused, his cane resting lightly on the pavement. A man like Sir Charles, mon ami, lives for the drama of his own creation. Had he succeeded, he might have written another act, another tragedy. But Hercule Poirot does not permit encores for murderers. His eyes twinkled, a spark of pride in his little grey cells. At his flat, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook closed, the case complete. The aftermath was not his stage, but he knew the ripples of his work would shape the lives of those involved. Angela's decision to leave the theatre, Lady Mary's quiet strength, even Manders' brooding artistry, or would find new paths, freed from the shadow of Sir Charles's ambition. Poirot sipped his tisane, his mind already turning to the next puzzle, for where there was human passion, there would always be a role for Hercule. Chapter 12. Poirot reflects the fire in Hercule Poirot's London flat crackled softly, casting a warm, flickering glow across the room's polished surfaces and symmetrical furnishings. Outside, the city was cloaked in a late winter dusk, the streetlights haloed by a fine mist that muffled the clatter of cabs and the murmur of passers-by. Poirot sat in his favourite armchair, a cup of fragrant tisane cradled in his hands, its steam curling upward like a wisp of thought. His notebook, now closed, rested on the side table, its pages filled with the intricate details of the Crow's Nest and Melfort tragedies details that had led to the unmasking of Sir Charles Cartwright. The case was solved, the confession secured. Yet Poirot's grey-green eyes held a contemplative depth, as if the final act had left echoes that lingered in his mind. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, had departed for his club, promising to return for dinner and a game of bridge. Alone, Poirot allowed himself a rare moment of introspection, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup as he replayed the events of the past months. The dining room at Crow's Nest, with its glittering chandelier, and the vicar's sudden collapse. The sombre grandeur of Melfort Abbey, where Dr. Strange fell to a poisoned glass. The Savoy, where Poirot had staged his own denouement, were scenes in a drama of human passion and betrayal. The little Belgian sipped his tisane, its warmth the counterpoint to the chill of his thoughts. The case, he mused, was a study in contrasts. The quiet insignificance of Reverend Babington, a man whose death was a mere rehearsal, and the calculated elimination of Dr. Strange, whose suspicions threatened the killer's carefully crafted illusion. Sir Charles, with his actor's charm and ruthless ambition, had played the role of both director and villain, weaving a tragedy that demanded Hercule Poirot's keenest insight to unravel. The motive jealousy, pride, the need to control Angela Sutcliffe had been the heart of the crime, a heart as old as humanity itself. Poirot's thoughts turned to Angela, her golden curls and haunted eyes, a vivid image in his mind. Her decision to abandon the theatre, to seek solace in a quieter life, was a testament to the wounds left by Sir Charles's betrayal. She had been his muse, his obsession, yet she emerged as a survivor, her resolve a quiet victory over the darkness that had enveloped her. Lady Mary Lytton-Gore, too, had shown strength, her sharp wit and unflinching honesty aiding Poirot's quest for truth. Even Oliver Manders, with his brooding resentment, had played his part. His observation of the bitter champagne, a spark that ignited Poirot's suspicions. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, and Poirot's gaze drifted to his notebook. He had no need to open it. Every detail was etched in his memory, a mosaic of clues that had led to the vial, the nicotine, the rewritten play, Sir Charles's arrogance, inviting a detective to witness his crimes. Weaving his methods into a script had been his undoing. Yet Poirot felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction tempered by sorrow for the lives lost. The vicar, a man of gentle faith, and Dr. Strange, a guardian of Angela's independence, deserved better than to be pawns in a murderer's game. He rose, setting his cup aside, and walked to the window, the mist pressing against the glass like a curtain. The human heart, he reflected, was the greatest stage of all, where love and pride played out their eternal conflict. Sir Charles had sought to control that stage, to bend others to his will, but he had underestimated the power of truth. Poirot, with his little grey cells, had restored order, but the cost lingered a reminder that justice, though necessary, could not undo the past. A knock at the door broke his reverie, and Poirot turned, expecting Hastings. Instead, it was a messenger, delivering a note from Lady Mary. He opened it, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. Monsieur Poirot, Angela has left for Devon, seeking peace. I shall join her for a time to help her heal. Your work has given us that chance. With gratitude, Mary Lytton Gore. Poirot smiled, a rare warmth softening his features. The aftermath, though painful, held seeds of renewal, and he took comfort in that. He returned to his armchair, polishing his moustache with a silk handkerchief, a ritual that grounded him. The case of the three-act tragedy was closed. Its players dispersed, some to prison, others to new beginnings. Yet Poirot knew the world would never lack for mysteries, for where there was passion, there would be secrets, and where there were secrets, Hercule Poirot would be needed. He picked up a new notebook, its pages blank, and placed it beside the old one. The firelight danced across the room, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with anticipation. The next puzzle awaited, and he would meet it with the same clarity, the same precision, that had unmasked a killer in this tragic play. For now, he sipped his tisane, content in the knowledge that order, however fleeting, had been restored to a world of chaos.